Hola, gringas y gringos, and welcome to
Gringos Are Us.
Expats with a Plan.
I'm Mark,
I'm Gina.
and this week we're going to take you to the Mexican Sistine Chapel, the sanctuary in Atotonilco, right after this.
And welcome back. So, as Mark just said, we took a trip to the Santuario de Atotonilco. I think I said that right.
I do.
Okay. So, interesting thing about this church complex is that the town of Atotonilco was really small. It's everything you think of when you think of a really small, tiny, dusty countryside Mexican village.
Yeah, you look for Clint Eastwood riding into town on his horse with his serape on, going, yeah. Little cigar going. It's like, okay.
It has a population of less than 1,000 people.
It's very small.
But because of this attraction of this fantastic UNESCO World Heritage Site, it gets about 5,000 visitors a week.
Yeah, it got that designation from UNESCO in 2008, and they're proud of it. Every bench around that church has UNESCO World Site.
So Atotonilco is pretty much famous for the thermal hot springs in the area. In fact, very close to the entrance of the village, you will find La Gruta Spa, which is a huge attraction in the San Miguel de Allende area.
Yeah, it's right off the main road that takes you from San Miguel de Allende to Dolores Hidalgo, and about halfway there, you'll see the sign for the spa. You turn there, and you just sort of keep right on going till you think you're in the middle of nowhere, and then bang.
There you are.
Buses.
Buses, seriously. The hot springs were considered very sacred by the Chichimecas in pre-Hispanic times for their healing powers. Yeah.
No, we did not get an opportunity while we were there to get over there. Part of it was because the best time to go is during the week, which is when she works. And then it was like the weekends. Everybody goes to get healed. So
why not? Body and soul, right?
That's it.
So it was these thermal hot springs that attracted the founder of this church to the area.
Father Luis Felipe Neri Alfaro.
We're just going to call him Father Neri.
But why?
Because his name is a mouthful.
Okay.
But Father Neri was actually teaching in the missions in Dolores Hidalgo, and he wasn't feeling well. So he traveled over to the thermal springs looking for some of that healing vibe.
Why not?
And story has it he fell asleep under a mesquite tree and had this vision from Jesus stating that he wanted this site to be a location for pilgrimage and penance and worship.
Didn't I see that in The Doors, the movie?
It's very possible.
Oh, okay.
It's very possible. So Father Neri, after having this vision, wakes up and decides he's going to purchase the hacienda and all the surrounding land.
Where did he come up with that money?
I think he just had the money. And interesting thing is the landscape reminded him very much of Jerusalem. And that makes sense because it's
desert.
It's desert,
rocky.
Kind of rocky, bare, dusty. You know, the mesquite trees are not known to be very elegant looking.
No, they're not just very pretty trees.
Right.
So then on May 3rd of 1740, they had the ceremony. Father Neri blessed the first stone that got laid, and they started construction on this beautiful church.
Indeed. So you might notice us occasionally looking down at some notes because there's a lot to digest here. So the church started being built in 1740, and it was almost finished by 1776.
Just in time for the beginning of the U.S. Oh, that's right. They didn't care about what happened in the U.S.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. So some of the parts of this church were specifically designed to be built in the following practices of Ignatius
Of Loyola,
of Loyola.
which is where Loyola universities come from.
And this man is one of the founding members of the Jesuit order,
Yep.
and they're very much into penance and mortification of the flesh, basically. So a lot of pilgrims have adopted that philosophy, and they make a pilgrimage every year to this beautiful church.
Not the Mayflower Pilgrims.
Not those
Oh,
ones.
okay.
No, these are penitents. The penitents arrive, and they arrive with whips and flog themselves.
That
and
sounds like Indiana Jones.
I know.
A penitent man.
A penitent man kneels. And in this case, some of these penitents are kneeling and walking on their knees for miles, and their knees are bloody, or they're wearing thorns, crown of thorns, or they got cactus. Hair shirts. If you don't know what a hair shirt is, it's just a really coarse animal hair, like goat hair. It's itchy, like crazy itchy. And they make a shirt out of it, and they wear that. Cactus. Nopal with the thorns bound to their chests. And of course, like I said, the whips.
Self-flagellation.
Yes, self-flagellation is a thing. In fact, the vendors actually sell souvenirs on the street, and some of those souvenirs are whips.
And itty-bitty little tiny whips for your keychain.
True. If you want.
So you can beat your keys up when they don't do right.
Pew, pew. Okay. So the interesting thing about this is that it's such a huge site. It's such a significant historical and religious site that they get about 100,000 pilgrims a year.
Felt like there was that many there that weekend we pulled up.
I know, it did feel like that.
Even the goats weren't happy with us.
And because they get so many pilgrims, they actually do have dormitories and dining halls that are built specifically for the needs of their pilgrims.
Yeah, and it's, with like about 5,000 tourists. That's just people coming to see on a weekly basis, and about that totals up to about 100,000 a year that they get there. Mm-hmm. So you can see during the pilgrimage time, it does step up rather strongly, and they get a lot of people coming up there for that event. And apparently Sundays are the big days, and they put the vendors out on the streets, and you'll see some very interesting wares that are being sold out there. Of course, as everywhere in Mexico, you got wares, and then great food, and then more wares, and then more great food.
A lot of copper.
There was a lot of
There was copper. A lot of copper. It was cool.
And was it brass?
Or was it brass? I mean, I don't know.
I don't know.
Brass is made from copper.
Brass in pocket.
Anyway. Okay, so as Mark mentioned, it was named a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2008. That's a pretty significant thing. This is not a really big church, folks. It's not a really big church. But what makes it unique is frescoes. Just about every inch of the inside of this church is painted, and painted in a style that is recognized as Mexican folk Baroque art. And it's listed as a fine example of that art form.
They basically found the Mexican Michelangelo.
You know it.
To go do it. And this man spent the next 30 years doing the ceilings with all these frescoes. He did get some assistance from one gentleman. The one who spent the majority of the time and did most of it was Miguel Antonio Martinez de
Pocasangre. Pocasangre.
And then the collaborator on it later was Jose Maria Barajas.
And both of these men were indigenous. That's pretty significant as well. They were commissioned to do this art, and they were Mexican.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they had to throw the little Mexican flair in there because, as you'll notice, they replaced the Roman soldiers with Spanish conquistadors.
They did. And there are a lot of figures that are obviously indigenous in their features that were incorporated into the art. So it's pretty cool.
Yep.
some of the things that are very significant about the sanctuary are the historical significance. For example, Ignacio Allende, famous for San Miguel de Allende, he was married in this church.
And then Miguel Hidalgo, of Dolores Hidalgo, Father Hidalgo, who led the uprising, brought a small little ragtag army that he put together up there in Dolores and went to this church to retrieve the banner of the Virgin of Guadalupe that they actually put in front of, and they carried in front of their army in their attempt to free Mexico.
And they marched on to San Miguel waving that Virgin of Guadalupe banner.
And that is something that still gets done during Easter, is they make that trip.
Well, the trip
is
actually with
the Señor.
El Señor de Coloma, I think it is, Coloma. You'll see a very quick image of El Señor. He's tied to a column where he was beaten. Every year, that statue, right before Easter season, is removed from this sanctuary, and it is marched in a procession all night long from Atotonilco to San Miguel de Allende. This started historically, as the story goes. There was a man in San Miguel who was sick, and they thought he was dying, and part of his last rites and everything else was he requested, I can't remember if he requested the statue or a miracle or something, but I think he requested to have the statue brought to him. And when they brought it to him, he miraculously recovered. And so every year they do this now, and it kicks off the Easter season in San Miguel de Allende. And then at the end of the Easter season, they march it right back to Atotonilco in an all-night march. That's a long walk. What, about 12 kilometers?
Yeah, I'd say that's probably
Yeah, I mean,
accurate.
that's
12,
long.
I guess about 12 kilometers, just up 51, and then you have the hike all the way over into the village. So
there's a lot of historical significance of this particular small little church in this community close to San Miguel de Allende. Hope that you enjoy this video. Buenas tardes. Groot. You know I love those things. Well, we hope you enjoyed that short tour. It really wasn't very long of a tour. We basically just went into this small little town, visited this small little chapel for its historic significance, and walked around looking at the small little tienda stands.
Well, yeah, but we had to get around the really big buses before we could get to the little bitty town.
It's incredible. There must have been 3, maybe 4 buses in that town. And if you can imagine all those people off the bus into that little street.
Walking back and
Yeah.
forth across the street, it just and the, you know, like you saw the goats in front of us. They weren't happy. They wanted to get out,
Yeah.
go
yeah.
someplace.
They were
so,
funny. They were
but
really
it
funny.
really was a very interesting trip. And then hearing, were they the monks?
Oh, yeah, we can't tell. You could hear in the video as you were watching, there was some chanting and singing going on. What I don't know is, was that live or was that recorded and piped in for just for the atmosphere?
Was it Memorex?
Was it Memorex? Yes, where you're blowing your hair back.
I never had that much hair to do that.
I mean,
but
it
anyway,
was a very charming place.
yes.
And so I guess
it really was.
what we'd like to say is that the main chapel is free.
Mm-hmm.
And then the side chapel where they had the 3 mannequin displays and some more paintings on the wall, that's a 20 peso
Donation.
I guess you could call it a donation. It's on your honor. There's a box there, and if you want to go into that section of the church, it's 20 pesos.
If you want to rip off the church, you're really feeling bad. So yeah,
This is true. This
20
is true.
pesos.
Just pay them their 20 pesos.
Yes.
It helps with restoration efforts. And they did undergo a lot of restoration at one point, and it took quite some time and it was extensive. But I guess I would want to say, if you wanted to plan a visit, you could wrap this up together with maybe a combination visit to La Gruta Spa, and you're right there in the area. Just slide on over and visit the chapel.
Or you can do it like we did. We did part of the day in Dolores Hidalgo, had lunch, and on the way back, swung right in, did the 30, 40 minutes, maybe an hour.
Yeah, I think we were there a total of an hour, and that included looking at little things on the street.
And if you go out the backside of Atotonilco, it's a fun drive. It gets a little steep, and it was really pretty cobblestone. It just was like, yeah, if it hadn't been for the buses blocking the other way, I'd have found a way of turning around, but we came out the back end of it. So
It was very enjoyable time,
Yes.
though. It's impressive to me to see art that has been isolated in such a way that it's considered an example of what this art form looks like. To be able to say, this is a UNESCO heritage site, and this is a prime example of Mexican folk Baroque art. And to be able to look at it, and you can tell that there is an influence in Belgian and Flemish artists, but they've included indigenous features in some of the people. So they were bringing their own culture into it. And of course, the Spanish conquistadors, as opposed to the Roman soldiers. Again, this is an indigenous man, and his assistant was an indigenous man, and they were bringing in their culture into this significant work, you know.
And who was going to tell him he couldn't do it?
I guess Father Neri, maybe.
Yeah, well, guess
I don't
what?
know.
Good luck with that. You know, here, Father Neri, here's a paintbrush. You can do it yourself. Yeah.
That is really impressive, though. If you think about it.
30 years.
30 years? I mean, that means you're laying on your back on top of scaffolding. I just can't imagine the work. I just can't imagine the work that's involved in doing something like that.
That's not work. That's passion.
It is passion.
Yeah.
And there's not that much bare wall.
And
There really isn't.
judging by the quality
Or
of the work,
ceiling.
you definitely know it was passion. It was not
Oh,
work.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
So,
And that's it. That is our little trip to Atotonilco. We hope that you enjoyed it.
if you are in San Miguel de Allende or Dolores Hidalgo or even Guanajuato City, it's well worth the trip.
Oh, yes.
You know, it's a quick trip for everybody, but it's definitely something that you will really enjoy.
And that is it for this week's video. We are Gringos R Us.
Expats with a plan.
And remember, we are doing it. You can too.
And here's some more videos.
That you might enjoy.
We hope.
Hasta la próxima.
Adios.